Hello and welcome to Private Cloud on a Budget, Solving the Build versus Buy Dilemma. My name is David Davis and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by Stratascale. Thanks so much everyone for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. We got a great lineup of content and a really expert speaker lined up on today's webinar, so this is going to be really worth your time. Trust me on that, especially if you're interested in private cloud. So before we get into it, a few things you need to know about the event. First off, if you have questions, we want this to be a highly educational event. Make sure you use your GoToMeeting question box there to enter your questions. We'll be monitoring those questions and we'll have a Q&A session all about private cloud at the end of the webinar. Also, I'll be asking you 3 questions during the event. These are poll questions to get your feedback and the state of what you're doing with private cloud, and then I'll be sharing the results of those with the audience so you can see how you compare to others who are joining today's event. And then finally, you might be interested in the prize that we're giving away today. We'll be handing that out we'll be announcing the winner of the $300 Amazon gift card at the end of the webinar. You just need to be present on the webinar to be eligible for the drawing. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off and get started. As I said, my name is David M. Davis. I'm a 8-time VMware vExpert. I'm a partner at Actual Tech Media. I'm also a CCIE, a VMware Certified Professional, and have been creating a video training around virtualization and cloud computing now for many years. And I'm excited to be joined today by Mr. John Mao. He's the Director of Business Development at Stratascale. John, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background?
Yeah, so I've been in the IT industry for, almost 15 years. Right now I'm currently running business development, looking after our partnerships and alliances, but also just generally interested in following mega trends in the industry around cloud adoption, private cloud, hybrid cloud, and so forth. So happy to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for being on. And John, I've known John for a while. I've met him at a few different conferences at VMworld, at OpenStack Summit, and I know John is, I could talk to him probably all day about cloud computing and trends in the industry. So, make sure you queue up those questions and ask your questions on the event today because John has a lot of great experience to share. So today's topics, first off, we'll be discussing the pros and cons of building versus buying your very own cloud, your own private cloud. A lot of people are thinking about, should I move to the public cloud? Should I create my own private cloud? Should I download something like OpenStack or some other solutions? How should my company get started? We're very interested in private cloud. What should we do? So we have a lot of great points to share on the pros and cons of doing that. We'll be talking about the known and the hidden costs of private cloud infrastructure. There's a lot of gotchas out there, to be on the lookout for. We'll discuss the differences between open source software, such as OpenStack, and using a turnkey pre-built product. And then finally, we'll help you to make the right choice for you and for your company on, the big question, whether you should build or should you buy your own private cloud solution. So before we jump into that, I've got a couple quick poll questions here for the audience. And like I said, I'll share the results of these once most everyone has answered them. The first question is, where are you on the private cloud adoption curve? So basically, what's the status of your company? Are you testing? Are you just learning about private cloud? Have you implemented a private cloud, maybe in test, or you're in the process of doing it? Or do you have a private cloud in production? Or maybe you're just not using private cloud right now and still just, kind of checking out what's available out there. So I appreciate you answering that, and let me go ahead and share the results of that. As you can see, 52% say they're still testing and or learning about private cloud. 9% are in the process of implementing. 19 have some sort of private cloud in production, and 20% are just not using private cloud at all. So maybe still learning as well. And then one other question, and that is for those of you out there who are using private or hybrid cloud today, what technologies are you using? Are you using OpenStack? Are you using something from VMware? Maybe VMware's software-defined data center suite. Are you using something from Microsoft? Some other open source software solution, or none? Still learning, still evaluating today. And it's, as you can see, it's a multi-select question there. So you might be using VMware with OpenStack. You might be using Microsoft with some other open source software. And let me go ahead and share the results of that. And as you can see, 11% are using OpenStack today, 45% are using VMware for private or hybrid cloud, 25% Microsoft, and 36% still evaluating. So I appreciate you answering those. And with that, let's jump into today's content. So the first thing I want to point out, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, is that there's a big difference between virtualization and private cloud. And when I first heard about private cloud, I'm willing to admit it, many years ago, I thought, hey, cool, my VMware vSphere infrastructure is now a private cloud. It's got a vCenter, right? So it's a private cloud now. It's just a new way of saying virtualization, but that's not at all true, right? To really have a private cloud or any kind of cloud, you need what they call a CMP or a cloud management platform, and that is running at a higher level above the virtual infrastructure. And the CMP provides you, a centralized management point for multiple virtual infrastructures, and those could span multiple data centers. And then you have things like self-service. You probably have things like chargeback or showback. You have a whole higher level of abstraction above whatever virtual infrastructure that you're using underneath your private cloud. All right, so that's the difference in virtualization versus private cloud. So you can't just add a CMP on top of virtualization, or you can just add a CMP on top of your virtual infrastructure, and ta-da, you have a private cloud. But you want to know more about it. There's a lot more, to just, hey, we install the CMP, and ta-da, now we have private cloud. So true cloud computing must offer things like on-demand. It must be flexible and simple when it comes to scaling of your resources. Self-service, provisioning for maybe power users or different divisions in the company. Charging for only the resources that are consumed is typically a part of a private cloud. And an important piece that I didn't mention in the previous slide is multi-tenancy or secure multi-tenancy. So you can have multiple, they could be customers, they could be partners, they could be divisions in your company, all consuming that same private cloud infrastructure, and they're not able to access other resources, and the resources are carved up in such a way that you can see exactly who's using what. Now, VMware has their software-defined data center, but I like to think of a software-defined data center in a vendor-agnostic way, and just say, the SDDC or the software-defined data center, basically using software-defined solutions in an enterprise data center. It doesn't have to be a VMware solution. It might be a VMware solution. So you have SDC or software-defined compute, which could be just virtualization. You have software-defined storage or SDS, which could be, a lot of people call it hyperconvergence, but really it's just distributing the storage across the compute in the data center. And then software-defined networking or SDN. So all these different software-defined solutions kind of make up the SDDC or the software-defined data center, and then typically there's a lot more around it than that. And I think a good question, for John, if you don't mind me asking right now, John, is how would you compare the SDDC to a private cloud, or is software-defined data center a private cloud? Are they the same thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a couple of weeks ago I was out at AWS reInvent. And it kind of dawned on me for the first time. The SDDC, by and large, the definition of the words used in it feels like something that was really invented by an IT-centric view, right? So it was really focused around how do we virtualize aspects of managing and operating the data center. But if you go to the event like reInvent from AWS, and you understand the consumption model, the people that are actually consuming the public cloud, they tend to be more of the lines of businesses, the business units themselves, a lot of software developers as a result. So private cloud to me encompasses a lot of the things you mentioned previously, right? It encompasses not only how you manage the infrastructure itself, but it's also around how you deliver it as a service, how you deliver infrastructure as a service, and how it's consumed ultimately by the end user as well. So maybe it's not necessarily now just around compute, storage, and networking, but it may actually focus around higher order services or even application or cloud services that are useful for constructing new cloud applications. So I think there's definitely overlap from a technology perspective, but some of the nuanced differences, in my opinion, really stem from how the consumption model around these two terminologies.
Yeah, yeah, excellent points, John. Thank you. And then on top of, like we said, this software-defined data center, you've got, some sort of cloud management and automation solutions. And many people, when they think of private cloud for the enterprise, they think of OpenStack, which is great. It's a great private cloud solution. It creates excellent, IaaS or infrastructure, as a service, private cloud, and certainly you can download OpenStack. It's open source, and you can try to implement it yourself. But I'll just tell you from the experience that I've had, it's not easy to do. It's not like a typical, off-the-shelf package that you download and just install and you're up and running, within the hour. There's a lot to learn. There's books, there's video training, there's consulting services, from big companies. And you talk to companies, I've talked to, administrators who have implemented OpenStack, and I asked them, for example, how did you get started in OpenStack? And they say, well, me and the others on our OpenStack team. And I say, well, hold on, how many people are on your OpenStack team? Well, we've got 12, or whatever it might be. So there's, these companies are using very large teams, lots of experts, dedicated staff to implement OpenStack. And I don't want to scare anybody away from it, but at this point, with my experience, it's not always just easy to get up and running. It has a lot of time requirement that must be put in to get it going. So when you put all these things together, you have your virtual infrastructure at the bottom there, CPU, memory, storage. You have software-defined storage and a hyperconvergence layer, if you will, really. And then you have a cloud management platform, which could be OpenStack on top. And then you have multiple clouds and multiple virtual infrastructures being all managed at a single point. And you can run, containers, virtual machines, whatever you want to do. So this is kind of where I see things moving in the future. And then, really scaling this up into the data center of the future. So you have a very large infrastructure, which could be across multiple data centers, and over time, virtual machines flowing back and forth, or applications spanning multiple data centers for high availability, for capacity, scalability, and so forth. And at this point, I'd like to bring John on to talk to us about the private cloud and kind of the build versus buy dilemma, because I think so many companies out there, they're interested in cloud, and they might not be ready to just put everything in the public cloud. That might not be the smart decision for them. They really want to use private cloud. They want to get started with private cloud, but where do they go? How do they get started? John, what's your take?
Yeah, thanks, David. So, do you want me to take over the slides, if that's okay?
Let me go ahead and make you presenter here.
Yeah, and I think the topic here that I'm really interested in talking about today is something that I've heard over and over again in the last 3 years. So I've been with Stratascale for almost 3 years now, and the conversations that I have with customers, with end customers, with data center owners, kind of keeps coming back to some of these challenges I'll talk about. So when I think about implementing your own cloud, you're implementing your own private cloud, the analogy that comes to mind, and I love analogies because I'm a pretty simple man. Home ownership is a great analogy because I think there's two approaches that most people are taking when it comes to private cloud, and it's very analogous, like I said, to home ownership. So when you're looking to move into a new home, a new house, if you've been through this process before, there's ultimately two really big decisions in which you have to make right up front. which is to decide whether you want to build a custom home or to buy a pre-built or an existing home of some sort. And there's no right or wrong answer here. They both offer a set of pros and cons in their own right. On the custom home side, the best and most powerful advantage of building a custom home is you get exactly what you want. So I know our current CEO is building a house right now, and he's got very unique tastes, from landscaping to pizza ovens and so forth, and you get to pick exactly what you want when you're building a custom home. Now, the downside of building a custom home is that it requires a extremely skilled team. So you're talking about hiring a general contractor, you have to hire architects to help design the team, very skilled people, from the framers to the carpenters to the plumbers and so forth. And as a result, it usually takes months, maybe years, depending on how big of a house you're building, before you can actually move in. And oftentimes what ends up happening is that as you're in that process of building, there tends to be a lot of risk for runaway costs, right? So all of a sudden you want to change this thing. Okay, well, that tacks on another $20,000 and another 2 months to your schedule. So just pros and cons again. But at the end of the day, you can build an immaculate looking house that's beautiful, that's perfectly suited for you and your family. And you get, again, like I said, exactly what you want, from floor plan to the finishes. On the other side of the equation, you can also look at this from buying something that's already pre-built, or maybe it's finished out already. And oftentimes these homes can be move-in ready. They're something you can move in within days, if not weeks. And they tend to be very predictable from the cost. You're buying a fixed purchase price. You know exactly what the commissions are. You may, even if it requires repairs, you'll know what those are ahead of time from the inspection and so forth. And so the team that's required to get you into that house, into the move-in ready house, tends to be much smaller. You will still need occasional people for like maintenance and so forth, but that kind of applies on both sides. So it's just one of the joys of home ownership, as we say. The downside of buying something that's pre-built is that you don't get exactly what you want per se. So maybe it comes only in a certain floor plan. Maybe it comes with only certain finishes and certain appliances that may not be what you're looking for. But it is still, at the end of the day, a house that you move in and you can now call your own. When we talk about this from a cloud perspective, there's the same holds true. There's two common approaches that you can take, and David touched on one of these earlier, which is OpenStack. There's other ones as well. That's one of definitely the bigger ones out there. It's an open source project, and it definitely allows you to build the perfect house, if you will. But at the end of the day, what it really is a toolkit. It's a toolbox. It's like walking into a hardware store and you have every single tool in front of you. From those tools and the materials, you can build any house to your heart's desire. But again, all the caveats from the previous thing apply. And on the other side, there are products out there, and this is where I'll hopefully share with you a little bit of what we're doing at Stratascale, that require no assembly, and they're move-in ready. So when you think about this again from the private cloud home ownership analogy perspective, the same pros and cons really hold true, right? Like I said, from a private cloud perspective, if you're building it, you can build it exactly the way you want, with the features and capabilities that you need as a business and as an organization, and maybe even finely tuned for certain applications that you may have within your business as well. The downsides of that, again, you just know that you have to have a lot of highly skilled team members, cloud architects, etc. And it'll take usually months, if not years, before you can start to consume the cloud or quote unquote move into that new cloud home that you have. Most people don't realize this, but they think that with I think I talk about this on the hidden cost side in a second, but from a TCO perspective, it also ends up tending to be a little bit higher. A lot of that results in the labor that's required to, hiring the best talent to make sure you can build it properly for your business as well. From a turnkey solution perspective, and I'll talk about what makes a turnkey solution truly turnkey, is completely different, right? For the exact opposite reasons of buying a pre-built home. you can move in within days. I mean, the right product that you select for building a private cloud, for buying a turnkey solution, allows you to move in within days, if not, maybe weeks, but not months and years. And oftentimes you don't need the same level of cloud expertise or cloud architects. You don't need the same development skills. Mostly the existing staff that you have that's running an infrastructure today in a data center, you think about your server teams and your virtualization teams and storage teams, can actually work with a turnkey solution to deliver the same experience. Now the downsides, again, this might start to make sense now, right? You don't get all the features out of the box, perhaps. Maybe there's a very, very specific feature that's not available today. Maybe that's something you can work out with the vendor of the turnkey solution. But it may not be there, and it might be something you have to compromise on, much like buying a pre-existing home. There's also, from the private cloud specific side, some solutions might also prescribe certain hardware architectures or even force you to buy certain appliances. Some are software-only solutions, some are appliances, but in both cases, it becomes a turnkey solution that again helps you get into that house, helps you move into the cloud in a very, very timely manner. So we talked about hidden costs early on as one of the agenda items, and I think these are the three things that I've heard from customers over and over again when I talk to people that started down this journey of building their own private cloud. The first one is software licenses. So there's a big, I guess, myth that open source software is free. And I think most people that have been down this road before with other open source solutions, people understand, I think for the most part, this is just a reminder that open source software is not really free. There still is a cost. You still have to have people that support it. Oftentimes there are commercial companies that do provide support for open source software, so you don't have to have that kind of maintenance. But it's not free. Okay, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that applies definitely so from the open source software perspective as well. The other one is that not all software, even whether it's open source or even commercial, is truly turnkey. And what I mean by that is you have to be very careful in certain software requiring heavy amounts of professional services, because that at the end of the day eats into your cost or adds to the total cost of ownership for your private cloud. So I know there are a lot of companies out there that do very well selling professional services to help get companies onboarded and up to speed from a deployment perspective and a setup perspective with different types of software, again, both open source and commercial. Just bear in mind that not all software, again, is truly turnkey, and that's something you have to factor in to the cost of deployment. And the last one is ongoing maintenance or ongoing support. Regardless if you're paying for support of the software itself, there's still a matter of physical people and actual skilled folks required to support most solutions. So one thing that most folks that maybe are aware of hidden cost number one and aware of hidden cost number two fail to understand hidden cost number three, which is that even after you get something up and running, day one goes fine, day 200, right, day 500 become a significant problem when all of a sudden things like managing and supporting upgrades, managing and supporting patches, adding additional functionality becomes cost prohibitive, right? Or even if it's not cost prohibitive, becomes difficult because the labor and the expertise may not be then in-house anymore. So that's something to consider as well. So how do you make the right decision for your organization? I boil this down into these two sides again. Consider building, okay, your own private cloud if for these three reasons. One, if infrastructure is really core to your business. So in other words, if it's a revenue generating platform, then I think owning it is very important because again, mostly from an ongoing support perspective for hidden cost number three, it's important to know that know how you're going to support this particular platform. In case there are issues, you don't want it to be affecting your top line as a business. That would be a big, big problem. The only caveat to that, or the only exception to that, potentially, would be for certain managed service providers. And the reason why I call them out as an exception is because most of them focus on kind of improving their operating margins. So in that case, there may be alternatives that are simpler if you buy a turnkey solution instead. All right. The number two, from a consider building side, if there are designated software architects and more importantly, software developers in-house that are allocated and kind of assigned, much like what David said, right, to supporting this infrastructure, that's a good sign. I know he mentioned, one customer he talks to with 12 folks. I know one company. There's actually a very, very large public company. They have over 70 engineers devoted to, and I mean 70 software developer engineers devoted to maintaining this infrastructure. That's the kind of level of investment you need. But again, it's worthwhile for that particular company because it is part of their core business. The third one is if you have a very specific business or application requirement that maybe an out-of-the-box turnkey solution doesn't meet, then you may not have any choice but to either build it yourself or hire someone to build it for you, because of just the very nature of the exoticness of the requirements that maybe exists for your organization. On the other hand, if you don't really think those three on the left are really key kind of decision criteria for you, and instead, if your core business is not infrastructure, but you still need the agility enabled by cloud infrastructure, by private cloud, for example, then you should definitely consider buying something that's more turnkey instead. If your staff also consists mostly of IT personnel, so think again of people that are very, very sharp experts in managing systems, virtualization, networking, and storage, but may not know the ins and outs of what SDDC or what the cloud paradigm really means from an end user perspective, then it may be time to consider looking at something more turnkey instead. And lastly, I think this is actually the stickler for most people. If at the end of the day, the organization as a whole, not just IT in specific, but the organization as a whole, really wants to make a shift to focus more on business value applications, focusing on developing and investing in technology that helps drive the top line for the business, then I think buying something more turnkey would help a lot, because it no longer requires that same level of focus and investment from purely maintaining the infrastructure instead. So that was kind of my take on the kind of the build versus buy decision. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to talk a little bit now on Stratascale specifically. Again, I don't believe, and just to be completely transparent, I don't believe that there's a one size that fits all for all customers. Again, like I said, some customers, some organizations building their own infrastructure actually makes a lot of sense, but not for all. And I think actually a majority of organizations maybe fall into this trap of thinking that infrastructure is core to their business. But I just would like to, plead with everyone to kind of really think about that and assess if that's truly the case. Because if it's not truly the case, then I think as an industry, as an IT industry as a whole, we can deliver more value to the businesses we're in if we start to think more along those lines. So, like I said, Stratascale, what we are doing, we're in the business of of helping organizations fast forward cloud adoption. And what I mean by cloud adoption is, like I mentioned earlier, I was at AWS re:Invent a couple of weeks ago, and the previous thinking that the public cloud was just a very niche kind of exotic use case for some very narrow cloud use cases. I think that conclusion has been proven false for the most part. It's not to say that everything is moving to the public cloud, and I don't think everything will move to the public cloud, But what is happening is that there's a transition in the industry that's demonstrating that most applications, especially new applications that are being developed, are being architected with a cloud mentality instead. Okay, so we can't avoid the public cloud, but at the same time, we still have infrastructures to worry about and sort of infrastructures to services to provide to organizations. So what we at Stratascale are focusing on is really helping companies transition towards that cloud strategy. So we help transform your on-prem infrastructure into that cloud native infrastructure that the public cloud providers have done a great job of providing. And what this allows your company to do is now provide an application-centric and services-driven environment for those lines of businesses. It makes IT function as a public cloud provider inside of your own organizations instead. We also focused on really helping the applications. So from a development perspective, we want to support both cloud-native applications, so things that are built in a very scale-out, distributed manner. But at the same time, we also know that there's a ton of existing legacy applications that have to run side by side inside of a data center for the foreseeable future. There's no changing that. There are still, I remember back in my very, very early days, I worked also on some mainframe systems that are still around running production databases and production workloads for very, very, very large organizations. So that's not going away. So how do you manage all of that? And Stratascale is in the business of providing a platform and a solution, a turnkey solution, that does just that. We can run VMs, containers, all within this unified platform without having to manage them as separate silos and worry about them as two different entities within the data center. And then lastly, we're extremely flexible as well in terms of how the roadmap for not only our company's product, but for the industry is moving forward. So we are big believers in hybrid cloud strategies. Like I said, I don't think anybody can now say that the public cloud is no longer going to be a fit for them. Okay, maybe a few very, very security conscious folks, but from a macro perspective, I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. So now it's how do you continue to deliver the same kinds of services to your internal end users while still simplifying the operational aspects and focusing on IT from the data center perspective. So the way we view it, Stratascale Symphony is our product, and I'll talk about an announcement we just made yesterday in a second. But the way we view our product is really in two different chunks, two different parts of the stack. So I'll start from the bottom. So the bottom is actually around capacity. So think about this as any hardware, any physical assets that you may have in your data center today. Symphony is in the business of transforming all of that into something that's more usable and more consumable. So whether that be servers and compute or storage itself or even networking, we turn that into a truly software-defined infrastructure inside of your data center. So that runs on any x86 servers. It's purely our solution is a purely software-only solution, although there are other vendors trying to do this from an appliance perspective. It's incrementally scalable in a linear fashion. It's now secured because it's in your own data center environment. And there's a lot of technology that we've invested into this converged capacity layer that makes the utilization of these resources much, much more efficient and much simpler as well. Now, again, that's the bottom half of how we view the world. The top half of this is around services and around cloud services. If you've ever had a chance to take a look at AWS, or if you follow some of their announcements, they're innovating at a blistering pace around delivering additional cloud services. So for example, one amazing service they just announced a few weeks ago at AWS was around image recognition processing. So being able to detect faces in different photos and be able to say, okay, here are all of the photos in which John appears, and then they can give that to you as a service. That's one very, very, very specific example of services. But these kinds of cloud services are what's enabling a lot of the innovation from an application perspective. the interesting thing is that most of this is not about infrastructure per se, but it's around, again, focused on the end user specifically, who's consuming this platform. So Symphony now, we just made an announcement yesterday, in fact, about a new version of our product called Symphony version 3, V3. And I'm going to walk you through really quickly just a couple of examples of new services that we're adding in our current version. This is in addition to some of the other things that we have already launched in version 2. Okay, so if you think about Stratical Symphony just from a high-level architecture perspective, just to finish out this point before we go into the version 3 stuff, converged capacity is around, again, any server, any storage, any networking physical assets that you may have. We can pull all those in. And what we're enabling on top of that are a set of cloud services that your developers will for sure be accustomed to. And if you can read the fine print in here, it's a little bit hard to see, but there are things around compute, around storage. Again, these are all software-defined self-service capabilities. So if you're familiar with things like AWS, you'll recognize names like EC2, EBS, S3, and so forth. Those are the exact same APIs that we expose to your end users, the consumers of this cloud, the consumers of the Symphony cloud running in your data center. All of this, again, installs literally in minutes within your own data center on top of your own systems of choice. All right, so what did we announce in V3? And I'll wrap this up, and then we can hopefully have some open, more interesting conversations around the industry and around maybe Stratascale as well. There's four main things just wanted to highlight. So we've now released inside of our product, in addition to block storage, which is the persistent volume storage for VMs and for instances, is object storage. So we now offer durable cloud object storage that is now Amazon S3 compatible. That's, again, natively built into the solution, which is very, very awesome. Object storage, if you're not familiar, is a new paradigm for storing items, we call them objects, without having to worry about things like a file system, without having to worry about things like a folder structure and so forth. It's more of a key value oriented paradigm to storing and retrieving millions, if not billions, of objects. Think photos, think text documents, et cetera, et cetera. Also, we've expanded out in V3 a whole suite of AWS-compatible APIs. So one analogy that I like to give is think about this as your own AWS private region. Okay, so in AWS language, I mean, you talk about regions as certain data centers geographically positioned around the world. So you would pick things like something in Virginia or on the West Coast or in Europe and so forth. Those are specific regions. So in your own data center now, with our software, with Stratascale Symphony version 3, we actually now offer you some of the most commonly used core AWS services like EC2, EBS, I just mentioned S3, and also VPC for consumption in the exact same manner that you would do with any other public AWS region in the world. One thing we've also focused on, we've gotten a lot of feedback on this, positive feedback on this, is around Kubernetes. So for containers, we've now introduced container support natively within the product. It is a fully managed Kubernetes as a service capability. So no longer have to worry about managing and maintaining a Kubernetes cluster. That's actually now something that our Symphony platform will do. All you have to do is specify how big of a cluster you need for your Kubernetes environment. You need 10 nodes, for example. We'll automatically spin that up. It uses standard Kubernetes from the open source community. It gets deployed, and then we're managing that lifecycle from beginning to end. You get a single endpoint, and you can log in, and it looks just like Kubernetes running on bare metal, running on Amazon, running on VMware. It looks the same as everything else. But we're doing things now like making sure that there's enough capacity for that cluster, making sure that the nodes are available. We're helping orchestrate all of the storage, networking, and compute services required for Kubernetes. All of that is done. It's literally a two-click operation to get Kubernetes spun up on top of Symphony now instead. And lastly here is an application catalog. So much like marketplaces that exist in other public cloud providers, and even on-prem solutions today with like VMware, traditional virtualization environments, We now have access to over 130 mostly open source applications that are pre-packaged, and you can now, with one click, deploy them into this environment as well. Okay, so just to summarize, we have, again, one of the few that I know of, turnkey private cloud solutions that is software only. And now with V3, it's also AWS compatible. So we believe that AWS obviously is the market leader from an adoption perspective. We want to bring a lot of that same experience in terms of how you consume, deploy applications into your own data center, with simplicity and ease of something that's truly turnkey. So our installations and deployments are very simple. You simply take, obviously you want to assess your own environment from a planning perspective, but you simply take a few physical machines. You install the same piece of software from us for Symphony V3 on all of the servers, reboot those servers, and you're pretty much done. You go into the user interface at that point, and you simply approve with one click each of the machines that you'd like to add to that physical cluster, and you're done. At that point, you're able to start uploading applications, uploading workloads, deploying Kubernetes clusters, deploying objects into object storage, and so forth out of the box. So I think that's it for our side. David, do you want me to pass not the ball, pass the presenter screen back to you?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that and show my screen. Hopefully you can see that now.
Yep.
Okay. And really, really good presentation, John. Thank you. I know we've got some questions here from the audience. If you haven't asked your question, go ahead and get it in. We got a lot of questions to answer in our Q&A session. While we get ready for that, and while I select a winner for the Amazon $300 gift card, I'm going to pop up the final quick poll question there, and that is, what's your time frame for implementing a private cloud? All right, looks like most everyone has voted. Let me go ahead and close that poll. And then I'd like to announce the winner of the Amazon $300 gift card, and that is Brian Strickvers. Congratulations, Brian. We'll reach out to you via email to send out your gift card. And now it's time for Q&A. So, John, some questions have been coming in, and I'll just go ahead and get started, I guess, asking you these questions because we got a lot of them to cover. So, the first one here is right now they're obviously a VMware user, so they're talking about they're considering putting in VMware VIO, essentially VIO. So they're asking kind of what's the basic differences between VIO using VIO OpenStack on VMware and moving to Stratascale with OpenStack?
So great question. So VIO is effectively VMware's OpenStack distribution, and what that means is they've taken all of the OpenStack projects. So they're taking a lot of the same source code and so forth, but now making it available to run on their hypervisor and some of their networking components, and I think maybe now also some of their storage technology as well. So it's I think it's a little bit it's pretty analogous. I think we've gone a little bit beyond that, because what we started to see from talking to our customers is that while OpenStack has been great for kind of pure infrastructure solutions, block storage instances where you can spin up VMs and so forth, what's really happening is the adoption of the public cloud has shown us that the drivers behind cloud adoption really focus on the developers, and what developers really want are additional cloud services. So it's a perfectly fine solution. I think it's I've seen it before personally, but just bear in mind that it's really just focused around infrastructure. So if you're looking to offer your end users more services like containers, for example, more services like object storage out of the box, I'm not sure that VIO offers all of that capability out of the box. It will still end up being a cloud project that you have to build on top of VIO. So adding additional projects from OpenStack, for example, into the equation is something you still have to do.
Got it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you all also offer software-defined storage and some level of software-defined networking as well. Is that true?
Yeah, we do. So we actually we're using the home analogy, we're kind of like a semi-custom home in the sense that we allow you to pick your own storage vendor. If you have existing storage vendor solutions, we make it extremely simple to add them as again storage capacity into the cluster with just a couple of clicks. If you don't have an existing storage or you want to use our own software-defined storage, we have that built into the product as well. So you have the choice. So it's like it's like picking your own wood floors, right? Picking the color of wood floors you want in your house. We give you that flexibility. And we do provide the same thing from a networking perspective as well. We provide a lot of the basic networking from the virtual networking perspective, for guest networks and so forth. We provide all that functionality like security groups and so forth out of the box as well.
Excellent, excellent. And then another quick comparison question here, and then we'll get into some of the more technical things. And so this person's, I don't want to mention any names, but they're talking about what's the difference between Stratascale and just a general, software-defined storage, hyperconvergence solution, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, we were David and I were actually talking about this before the webinar today, and I think hyperconverged. I think people mistake this. This is very, very, very important. Hyperconverged, in my mind, is an implementation detail, because at the end of the day, if you go to the public cloud and you ask for some resources, whether it be storage or whether it be compute or a container or an object storage service or a database as a service, whatever, the user doesn't actually know what the back-end implementation is. It could be running on an expensive storage array. It could be running on some commodity software-defined storage servers. You don't really know. So likewise, if we start thinking about, again, focusing on the end user of IT, of data center resources, what does that look like to them? It's a little bit of detail, right? That maybe doesn't really matter to the end user. So our view on that is, look, hyperconverged falls in the camp of something being very, very prescriptive. It is a turnkey solution. Most hyperconverged vendors will sell you an appliance, and what it's really doing is making virtualization simple because it's consolidating storage and compute. But what it's not doing for the most part are offering all of the services that we were talking about earlier today around compute, around containers as a service, around object storage, and so forth. In fact, if you go look on our website, stratascale.com, we just relaunched our website yesterday. I think it looks really nice. And if you go click on the product section, you'll see a banner of a bunch of services that are offered now. Oh, sorry, did I get dropped there?
Yeah, John, you're back. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. And so those services are something you should ask any HCI vendor if they actually provide. And you'll see from our perspective, we believe those services are really the key to the future. So we'll be adding more and more of those as we see fit from a customer, from our customer base. Maybe a little long-winded answer, but
No, I really like your new website, and you all have a lot of announcements around the new version 3. Many of the things that you talked about in your presentation today, but lots of really exciting Amazon, AWS-like features really rolled into that new version.
I'll just say one last thing on the hyperconverged thing. I think, and this is by no means to diss anything that hyperconverged vendors are doing today, but just understand that hyperconverged is not equal cloud. Okay, and if we again define cloud as being the tenets of like self-service, multi-tenancy, these cloud services that you add on top, then hyperconverged is just another means of providing capacity. Right? It's another means of providing virtualized capacity in a very simple to do form, right? I mean, it's making the complexity of storage configuration setup disappear, right? Which is valuable in its own right, but it's not the same thing as a cloud.
Got it. Got it. Another question here is about the application catalog. Can you explain more on the application catalog, how it works? Can it be customized?
Yeah, great question. So yes, the application catalog, think of it as more as the capability than the actual application inside. So what happens is you can customize each. So if you, our platform is multi-tenant, so you can actually customize this now per tenant if you'd like. And basically, this is a way that an administrator can control what types of applications can be launched on the cloud platform. So for example, you can do things like, well, you must use this version of Linux with Apache web server, and it must be with these patches because of our own security requirements or whatever, and that must be used for all workloads that fit in this category. You can then package that up and make that available so that any of your end users deploying new applications on top of that environment must use that standard and have no way of using anything else but that. So for a lot of companies that are very security conscious from like patching the OS perspective and everything else like that, it's a way to kind of make use policies to enforce that to each of the users on the platform.
Cool, cool. And then what about a self-service portal?
Yeah, so our product does have a self-service portal. It provides all of the metering as well. We also provide quotas. So if you want to set up 100 users each with a fixed quota in terms of how many vCPUs they can use, how much memory they can use, how much storage space they can use, you can, as an administrator of our product, you can configure all of those policies. And when you create those accounts, the user logs in. All they're able to do and see is, of course, their own resources. They can provision arbitrarily however many VMs or containers they want, as long as they're under the quota that they've actually been given on the platform itself. So it is fully self-service. You don't have to do any of this for the end user. The end user, like on AWS, goes and instantly creates their own virtual machines, their own containers, and so forth on their very own.
Excellent, excellent. And then what about running? We talked a little bit about Kubernetes. Can you run, I assume, Docker containers as well as VMs side by side?
Yeah, you can. So right now, again, there are different orchestration from a container perspective. There are different orchestration frameworks out there. There's a couple of big ones, and Docker's one of them. They have their own. Kubernetes is one. There's also companies like Mesosphere out there. We chosen to go with Kubernetes for just a couple of reasons. So basically, if you're familiar with how Kubernetes works, it is standard Kubernetes out of the box. So you can deploy any containers through the Kubernetes interface onto the platform directly. So you don't have to learn any kind of like Stratascale specific container APIs or anything like that. It's literally standard container management that's taken straight out from Kubernetes.
Okay. And if people are using another hypervisor today, like vSphere, how do they get to Stratascale? How do they make that migration?
So, great question. So we provide a couple of tools today. The simplest way is for you to export a VM from a VMware environment from vSphere. You just export it into an OVA file format, and then you drag and drop that OVA file format into our web browser or into our console, and it'll automatically upload it. And in the background, we'll do a quick conversion of the disk format and launch that VM for you instantly. It should carry forward all of the settings as well. Yeah, I think that's the easiest way. And if you have like raw VMware images, you can launch that. Or of course, if you wanted to start over from scratch, you can create any new images from like an ISO image as well.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And then Kenny here, he's asking about, you mentioned that Symphony can integrate existing storage, such as Ether Channel or iSCSI, to a hyperconverged infrastructure. Does it use an API? And like, what are the caveats around that? Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about AWS APIs, but we also do expose our own APIs as well as OpenStack APIs. And so what we did from a internal guts perspective, we actually leveraged something from the OpenStack community around the control plane part. So internally, we are using some open source technology around Cinder specifically. So any storage appliance that has a Cinder compatible driver should be doable within our platform. Now, not every single Cinder compatible storage solution out there in the market we have integrated into the system. However, I think there's about 10 or 11 vendors that we've already pre-integrated into our solution. So what that means is you go into our product, into the web console, and you can literally pick the vendor and the model and set up the configuration straight within the GUI, and not have to worry about going into a config file on the command line and doing all this hacking to get that to work. So we've pre-integrated a lot of those into our software solution to help make that a little bit simpler.
Cool, cool. And another question here came in about kind of overall performance and capacity management. Do you need an additional tool, or do Symphony users typically have an additional tool to do that kind of capacity management, or is that built in?
No, most of the capacity management is built in. I'm not sure exactly what that means in terms of capacity management. There's a couple of vectors that could take. I'll assume it means like resource balancing, and so forth, like workload placement and scheduling. We actually have a lot of that inside of our product. Again, this is what makes a product truly turnkey, in our opinion. It's not just the day one or day zero setup and configuration, but it's also the ongoing maintenance, right? So we're doing things like ensuring that there's no physical machines that have huge hotspots in terms of like having way too many VMs and having other servers that are completely underutilized. We denote that. We can also take action on that if the user lets us to automatically, where we can start to move more idle workloads off of that hot physical machine, for example, to help kind of ease the operational support from doing that manually afterwards. So there are tools that exist in the industry for that. We've baked in a lot of that capability into the product itself.
Very nice. So you talked about not only do you have the hypervisor, software-defined storage, software-defined networking, private cloud, your performance and capacity management. So many of these different tools that typically people add on, you all have integrated. I really like that. Another question that came in here from Stan is about security. What sort of security is built in?
Okay, so that will take a long time to answer. Security is a very broad category. If talking about network security, host-based security, it's a pretty broad field. Let's assume they're talking about network security because that's probably the most commonly asked. Most oftentimes, security can be done. Network security can be done two ways. You can do things through routing packets to a certain device for inspection. There's also ways you can do things like host-based security groups, right? It's almost like host-based firewalls in a sense, right? You can obviously set up on top of any virtualized platform today virtual firewall appliances. So there's a lot of different ways. I think a lot of that comes down to what the customer's requirements are. Some may require very, very strict use of certain types of appliances for regulatory reasons and so forth. Others may say, security groups and host-based firewalls at the vSwitch level, for example, may be sufficient. So lots of different approaches there. I think I don't know how to answer that in a broad stroke
Yeah, that's
across
okay.
the entire industry.
Yeah, we'll get back to Stan via email after the event. We can get
All
some
right,
more
no problem.
information, find out what the requirements are. I know we're running out of time on this event. I guess final question here came in from Ed, and he's asking, what's the learning curve? Basically, if we go to stratascale.com, register for an evaluation, how do we get up and running? How does that work?
Yeah, so great question, Ed. I think the one thing that is really amazing about this product, I know a lot of companies say this, so I can only say go and please try this for yourself. The software is extremely simple to install because you don't have to think about how to architect your environment. So what I mean by that is whether you have one server you're installing our software on or you have 100 servers you're installing our software on, the process is exactly the same. And because it's the same, you can actually automate that for scale. And the same piece of software gets installed everywhere, The only thing you're providing to us from an installation perspective is effectively the physical network configuration, things like IP addresses and subnets and and VLANs, for example, for our physical hardware installation itself. Everything else you do is in our web GUI, and it's extremely simple. You never have to go to the command line for any of that, and it's all click and point and click kind of set up from that point forward. So I think it's very easy. I'm a business guy. Well, I used to be a lot smarter in my old days as a techie, but it is very easy to do. I've actually done it personally myself, multiple installations. So I'm very confident any of you guys can do the same thing. So, but don't take my word for it. Please go to our website, sign up, and we'll be in touch, and we can give you access to the software to give it a shot. I'm happy to talk with you guys more about that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love chatting, as you said earlier.
Awesome. Well, a really great info today on private cloud, whether you should build it or you should use a turnkey product. Do you build it or buy it? Thanks, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join us. It's been a great event. Thanks to Stratascale for sponsoring the event. For more information, go to stratascale.com, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.